Is it that both channels are
Well, welcome everybody. Pastor Tim Carscadden here for our noon live stream, our prayer watch here on Monday. It is what day is it? 23rd day of September 2024. So glad you've joined us. Which camera am I looking at? Down there. Okay, I apologize. Trying to find out what camera I'm on. So glad you're with us. A very, very important day for us as we've been praying for Israel. We've been praying for the battle, the war that's going on there, updates, and we are blessed today to have our friend from Jerusalem, Benny Friedman. I'll bring him on here in just 1 minute. Just kind of want to give you where we're standing, what we're doing, what we're praying right now. We may at the end shift to the election a little bit, but right now we want to focus on this. This is big because it will affect the election. It is a big game player, or it's a big part of the game that's going on between the administration and Donald Trump's stance on the election and Israel's role. If you saw the news yesterday, even in America, it was debated always on the Sunday talk shows with our senators and congressmen. And, of course, Bernie Sanders is speaking against Israel as well as AOC. And then Senator Fetterman from Pennsylvania said that he loves it. He thinks it's the right thing to do. He disagrees with Bernie Sanders, so some dissension among the ranks of the left, which is good for us. But nonetheless, it's a topic that is very hot right now concerning what is going on in the world. We know prophetically and spiritually this is dangerous because it's a hotbed for other actors to get involved. We already have Russia helping Iran, China helping Iran. You got Russia helping in Syria, Assad. You have that player as well as Turkey helping, Hezbollah. You have Yemen involved. I think there are 7 different fronts that Israel's having to deal with in this battle. So I don't think there's another nation in the world that could handle what's going on. And I think it's the mercy of God, the grace of God that's on them concerning that. On my podcast today, I did a whole thing about why we stand with Israel. I think it's very important for you as a believer to know biblically and also in your own heart why we stand with Israel in this hour. I think it's extremely important because the conversation is going to grow in the public sphere, and you need to have an understanding why you stand. Not just because they're our ally or they're good people, whatever. You need to understand what the Bible says. And I said it on my podcast today, Israel or Israelites is mentioned over 2,500 times in Scripture, as well as Jew and Hebrew and those type terms. The Bible's littered with those terms. And if you don't see that, you're blind, that God sees this as a very important issue. So I have my son Zach here as well as Benny. We're so glad to have him with us. So we'll bring him on screen here now from Jerusalem, right there. In Jerusalem. He's got a new place he's living in. We're so glad to have him with us today. And so, Benny, glad to have you. Thanks for jumping on. I know it's a little bit later there, 8 p.m. there in Jerusalem, but thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, good. We're going to get right to it. Please share this link with your friends right now. I think this is a very important link to be following. It's on Rumble as well as our Pipeline Report on YouTube. That's the only 2 places it's located because we're going to talk sensitive issues and we don't want to be censored. So that's where we're going to be. We want you to share that with your friends. I put it on my Facebook page. I just copied the link from Rumble and put it on there. So Benny, obviously it's chaos right now in Israel. Why don't you start there? What's the sentiment? What are people feeling? What's the atmosphere in Jerusalem and in Israel right now with all that's going on?
Well, it's like you said, it's chaotic. It's quite interesting. You have this push of the nation trying to live a normal routine, even though we haven't had a normal routine for about 11 months now. But it's this eerie sensation that any minute something could happen and could trigger that big war that we've been talking about with Hezbollah. Now, as everyone knows, we're kind of we'll say wrapping up the war with Gaza. Not really. There's still a lot of fighting going on there, but the focus, the media, everything is on the north now. And the northern front has been a huge issue within Israeli politics. we've been fired upon since October 8th on the northern front. So also 11 months of rockets. We've got over 8,000 rockets fired from the north. I mean, that's enough, to start a war anywhere else in the world. But it's been that forgotten part of the country just because everyone was focused on Gaza, on the hostages, on the situation down there. But this has gone on for so long now, and now the rockets are starting to extend further and further in that, people in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem are saying they have the capability, and we don't want rockets landing in this part of the country. Not that the people up north are not, important, but once you start hitting major infrastructure, governments, buildings, or the bulk of the nation of Israel in that whole strip around Tel Aviv, it's a huge issue.
Yeah, and of course, I just some information I have about the Iron Dome and as well as protection because of my work with APAC. Um, it's amazing technology in the sense that they can determine pretty much where it's going to land. They decide when to shoot up and when not to shoot up because why waste a $50,000 interceptor when it's going to hit an open field and so forth. So the brilliance of that is incredible. Now, we did see this weekend Nazareth got hit. And I know for a fact that they don't tend to put Iron Dome in Arab villages because they don't expect, Hezbollah to be shooting in Arab
Shoot at
villages.
them.
But that just happens once on some of them just random shots that they do. But as well, okay. So let's talk about what is happening. I know personally because I've lobbied Congress on this that we measure at least 150,000 rockets that they have. Now I realize some of these are very old. Some of them are they're mortars. They're not very capable of doing much, or sometimes they won't even reach it out of the country. So that number is a little bit inflated. It just sounds good on the narrative, but we do know that they have high-level rockets that are being put in homes. I was briefed by some Lebanese people who actually are more than willing to give intelligence to Israel concerning that because they don't want these people near them. They don't want them in their neighborhoods. They don't want them. And I think why don't you speak to that of the Lebanese people having to live under the tyranny of Hezbollah?
Well, look, for the first time in a very long time, you actually have the Christian population of Lebanon speaking out against Hezbollah. They've never really been eye to eye with Hezbollah, but it's very dangerous to speak out about against the person holding the gun. It's become so extreme now that you have major Christian leaders speaking out against Hezbollah. These rockets are being hidden, just like in the Gaza Strip, within homes of people that have no say of what's going on there. And they're using them as proxies. If Israel responds, boom, there goes the family. But that's good propaganda for Hezbollah. There goes Israel again, destroying, the Lebanese people. Again, this is not a war against, if we go to war, it's not a war against Lebanon. It's a war against Hezbollah. And the Lebanese know that. And the Lebanese want nothing to do. Again, we're looking at Lebanon, which is it's a very mixed nation. You got Christians, you have Sunnis, and you have Shias, and many other, smaller denominations and stuff. But not everyone is behind what Hezbollah is doing politically or religiously. If you look at the greater Arab world as well, the same thing is going on. You have Arab newspapers condemning what Hezbollah is doing because Israel must respond. Everyone knows what Israel's response is going to be. And they're putting these rocket launchers in civilians' homes, and now they're being called out for doing that. And again, it could be the whole religious thing, Shia Sunni, but nonetheless, it's a valid point. You're putting rockets in people's houses, you're going to get bombed. And we know where a lot of these rockets are. And I think the past few days, we've seen a lot of these preemptive strikes. We've moved into a new phase. I hate to say a war. We're already in a war. Yeah. It's been going on for a while. But we've moved on into a new phase of this war of preemptive strikes. We don't want those 150,000 rockets fired down on us on a daily basis. And even with all the attacks, Tim, we've had over 100 rockets every single day fired at Israel. Yeah. So, there's a huge arsenal out there, and we have to destroy as many of these as possible before they rain down on our cities.
Okay, let's talk about that a little bit. We have a little clip from a news briefing from your IDF spokesman, and so I want to share this, and then I want you to comment on that about what he's really saying in between here. So his name's Daniel Hagari. I guess that's Hagari. I'm not sure how you say his name, but let's play this, and then you give some insight on what he's really saying.
About an hour ago, following indications that Hezbollah was preparing to fire towards Israeli territory, we began striking terrorist targets throughout Lebanon. The Hezbollah terrorist organization has been continuously launching attacks on Israeli civilians and has no plans to stop. This is southern Lebanon. There are dozens of Lebanese villages situated along approximately 80 kilometers of the border with Israel. For over 20 years, Hezbollah has deployed its arms inside homes and militarized civilian infrastructure. As a result, the Hezbollah terrorist organization has turned southern Lebanon into a battlefield. This is a village in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah stores cruise missiles, rockets, launchers, and UAVs inside civilian homes, hidden behind the Lebanese population living in the village. We are monitoring these activities, locating the weapons, and destroying them with precise intelligence-based strikes. I want to show you an example of a strike carried out a few weeks ago. Here we are exposing Hezbollah's method of hiding a cruise missile inside a home. The terrorists create a designated opening for the missile launch. Here you can see how we identified the terrorist making an opening in the building that exposed the missile. In a precise strike, the IDF eliminated the terrorist and this missile launching infrastructure shortly before the launch. Shortly, the IDF will engage in extensive precise strikes against terror targets which have been embedded widely throughout Lebanon. We ask residents of Lebanese villages to pay attention to the mass.
And that's how he's telling them to, if you're in those areas, to get away from those rockets. And here's the fact: we know this, that you'd be a fool not to see a rocket that size in your next door neighbor's house. I mean, you're gonna see what's going on. So this is the hard part for the Lebanese people, is that they know that Hezbollah is endangering them. They can't say anything. They're not armed. And they have no voice in the land because they've allowed Hezbollah to take over the government there. Yeah. So speak to us about what he just said, and what is he saying anything we're not hearing? He's saying between the lines there.
Yeah, so he started off the sentence with throughout Lebanon is what he said. Between the lines, what that means is we've only really operated in a certain part of Lebanon. It's always about what's called below the Litani River. This is technically the zone where Hezbollah was supposed to be kicked out of or retreat behind after the Second Lebanon War. And the UN is supposed to be enforcing that. So what he's saying now is it's not just this region. It's anywhere we find these rockets, we're opening the sphere to the rest of the country. And we've seen strikes throughout the entire country. But he said, now we're going after anyone, everywhere. Wherever they are, we're going to go after them. He said for 20 years this has been happening. Well, 20 years, Hezbollah has been in this region, not just the southern part. They've been in government, so they have access to the whole nation. But specifically in this southern part, they've embedded these rockets within the civilian population underneath the noses. I'm not even sure if it's underneath the noses of the UN, but the UN has done nothing about it. The people have done nothing about it. Now, this southern part was traditionally the Christian part of Lebanon. The Christians have all, well, not all, but a lot of them have fled for persecution reasons, but also for safety. Everyone knows this day was going to come eventually. In 20 years, Israel has been tracking this to an extent, but we now need to actually act on the intelligence that we have. And like you mentioned, there's a lot of people giving this information because they just want the rockets gone. They don't want a war in their, and Hezbollah sitting in the comfortable in their hiding places, while the actual civilians of Lebanon are the ones going to be targeted and be killed for this. Okay, you got some terrorists running around, some Hezbollah members running around shooting these rockets, but the bulk of the people are this innocent civilians there. So he was trying to overemphasize the terrorists that are there, the people responsible for this. There was a lot of casualties today within the Lebanese population. It's very unfortunate. And my heart does go out to them because they are being held captive, just like Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Hezbollah is doing the same thing. And look, they study each other's wars. They know what works and what doesn't work. This is a tactic that's always worked for the propaganda war. Hide them in civilian homes. Israel will respond. Boom. You have headline news in BBC, CNN, and every other outlet. So he's emphasizing the fact that these are terrorists. These are not innocent civilians. Some of them are, of course, but it's not because Israel is targeting them. It's because Hezbollah is putting them in densely populated areas, especially when you look at Beirut and these places up north. These are major cities that they're putting these infrastructures in, and they know exactly what's going to happen. Even if it's after the missiles fired, Israel will respond to the location of where the missile came from. And they put them in populated areas, and that's going to be the outcome.
And these are high level sophisticated. I'll let Zach catch you some
Yeah.
questions here, but these are high level sophisticated weapons. They're not just little, bottle
This
rockets.
this isn't, homemade like the Gaza Strip. This is straight from Iran.
Right, because they have much better access
Oh,
because
yeah.
of the land bridges that are all the way from Iran and so forth. And obviously, they've intercepted some of those. So, Zach, you have some questions here for Benny as well. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
so in the north, I just wanted, just so people can understand, just a few questions about what's going on. There has been a declaration of a special situation on the home front. Can you describe to us Americans, ignorant of what's going on, like the terminology there, what that truly means for the people of Israel and especially those in the north who are right there on the border with Lebanon and Syria?
Yeah. So firstly, the home front command is the people that give you all the information, what needs to be done, how to prepare your bomb shelter, your radios, medicine, things like that, documents to have. But they also the ones that give out the orders on a daily basis. Schools can operate, schools cannot operate. You can go to synagogue, you can't go to synagogue. How far does that order stretch to within a zone in northern Israel? So they're the ones responsible for the home front. And when they put a special situation like this, that means number one, we're either expecting a massive barrage or an invasion or something, and it's putting restrictions on the people and within this region. So northern Israel, stay close to bomb shelters is the most important. If you're really on the top there, sleep in the bomb shelter, or at least put your kids in the bomb shelter, and then you can go to your bedroom in case something happens. They want you to be aware that you're in a scenario where you'll probably not sleep through the night and you have to go to a bomb shelter. So be prepared for that. Don't go out driving long distances. Don't go grocery shopping at 10 o'clock at night. Don't go for a leisurely walk. And if you do, notice where the bomb shelters are, because they are situated throughout the areas. So
Yeah, that's
that's
good.
kind of
And
what that is. Yeah.
that's perfect. And what is, I guess, the resolve of the people, as let's say, kind of split it up between the north and say around Jerusalem, and then in the south? Because obviously in the north, they're, like you said, over 100 rockets a day recently.
Yeah.
Like, what's their resolve? And where's somewhere as we as intercessors can pray for them and the state of Israel?
So yeah, you broke it down perfectly into these regions. The north wants Israel to send in the troops yesterday. They want to get back to normal life. They want to take out Hezbollah's capabilities of doing this again. Again, if we go to war, and we are, in my opinion, at a state of war, this is the third Lebanon war, which means we've made two previous mistakes. We never finish off. Same thing with Hamas. We never finish off the enemy, or at least the capabilities of the enemy. In Gaza, had we destroyed all the tunnels before we left last time, this October 7th wouldn't have happened to an extent that it did. Same thing in the north. Hezbollah has probably not just as many, but they have many tunnels as well. So they want a ground invasion so that we can go in and destroy the infrastructure of Hezbollah in the north so that they can go back to a daily routine. A lot of the north is agricultural land, so a lot of our food supply is being affected. It is almost impossible to find cream in this nation right now. Dairy products are just, nowhere to be found. Jerusalem in the center of Israel is kind of that split area. We'll separate Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Tel Aviv is, not so much wanting a war. Let's do everything diplomatically. Their lives haven't really been affected as much as the Gaza war, as this Hezbollah Lebanon thing. So they just want to go with a peaceful solution. We could work this out politically somehow. Jerusalem is a little bit different. It's a mixed city, a lot of religious, some secular, but it's the heart of the government. The heart of the government, especially right now, is the right-wing government, to an extent, middle right. And Netanyahu has stated many times, we're going to finish this. We can't let this go. And he's agreeing with what the Northerners are saying. Took him 11 months to get here, but he was, 8 or 7 different fronts, we'll call it. It's a bit hectic. So
do you think some of the pressure from, I guess, those more in the north and the south is kind of pushing him in that direction?
Yeah, and I think it's a lesson that a very severe lesson that we had to learn, but he had to learn in his, leadership within being a prime minister. He has to do this because the effects of October 7th in the Gaza Strip and in the area around the Gaza Strip could be the exact same thing that happens on the north if we don't prevent this from happening. So I think he's got a lot of pressure from the people in the south and in the north to do this. And nobody really cares in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, the rest of the country. It's, normal life, rumors of wars. Every generation has seen multiple wars.
Yeah.
But when it starts to affect my pocket, like I can't find cream, gas is through the roof. I can't import, baby supplies because the shipping lanes are being hit by the Houthis. Now I'm mad. Now let's do something about it. But it has to get to a boiling point before we all agree as a nation that, yes, we can go to war with Hezbollah, whereas the people in the north have been crying out for 11 months now, let's go to war.
Yeah. Now, do you think, I don't know if you saw this, but the United Nations just passed a resolution basically saying that all Jews need to leave the old city of Jerusalem. I forget the exact numbers on that, but there were plenty few who abstained, but it passed, unfortunately, and now it's going to the ICC for them to, I guess, somewhat to adjudicate and enforce to a degree. Do you think that could, for those in and around Jerusalem, could kind of be a awakening call, a boiling point to say, hey, the world's kind of against us and they're siding with, in this instance, Hamas and Hezbollah to kind of shut us out of even our most holy city?
Yes and no. Look, we have a nice name for the UN. We call them Shmum, which means the United Nonsense. We don't take anything they say seriously. But there is an effect. Once that happens, then, foreign governments start taking that as law. They don't have the right to do this. We earn this right, this land by international law of war. So it is our sovereign land. But that being said, well, if France starts putting pressure on Israel and the United States and England, maybe we start, making concessions here and there. Maybe we start moving out some of West Jerusalem or East Jerusalem Jews into West Jerusalem and onwards. I hope it would never get to a situation like that. But as of now, we don't really look at them as an authoritative, especially with the ICC involved. We don't look at them as an authoritative.
I want to add to that because people understand when you have law, because this is something the narrative is always, well, there's international law, law. Well, who says there's international law and how do you define that? United Nations, I don't consider international law. And a lot of times these are not real laws they're trying to pass, they're just resolutions. And a resolution is just say, this is what we are feeling, this is what we're saying, and we're saying this, like they had the one about the embargo for weapons to Israel. Now, other countries can pick up on that and just say, hey, we're going to actually implement that because they passed that resolution. We see that in our Congress. We do that when we actually have a resolution bill I've lobbied for. It's just a statement. It's really what it is. Yeah. Now they can go further and move into, The Hague and do things like that and start trying to put international law. But I remember one time I was at the Capitol and I got cornered by this reporter, and I didn't know, but they were Al Jazeera. But they just kept saying to me, "This is international law. They're breaking international law." I'm like, "What law are you talking about?"
Yeah.
But that narrative, nobody ever challenges them when they say that. And I think we have a responsibility to challenge that statement as far as that's concerned, because it's not international law. And I think with Israel right now, what's going on there, I saw the United Nations in southern Lebanon have moved above the river now, the Honey River. Yeah. this is my problem. I've been on Mount Bethel. I was up there once, and I met a United Nations peacekeeper, they call themselves. And, I was talking to him about the war. This is when the Syrian war was really hot. And he was watching, observing it. And and he was just like, he's just the craziest war I've ever seen, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, I said, now, what about all the 150,000 weapons in Lebanon aiming here? And he goes, well, that's a different story. And he fully understood it existed, and he's a peacekeeper, but they refuse to share that with the world, that they're sitting there as an observer in southern Lebanon with rockets right next to them and not saying a word. I mean, is that obviously an issue? That's a topic of discussion, isn't it, in Israel?
Oh, it's unbelievable. I've met these same people, and you try to have a logical conversation with them, and you're talking to a brick wall. They've been read in on this narrative, and that's the only narrative that exists. And it's quite crazy for a soldier who's unarmed as a guest of another nation to condemn it. And none of them will say, we're here in the Golan Heights. We're here in the occupied Golan Heights is what they'll tell you. And then, when something happens to the troops on the other side of the border, where do they go? They run to Israel for protection. So we're the only actual democratic nation in this region, the only one willing to protect our guests and those that are not our guests to come in and get some safety in a terrible situation, yet they'll easily condemn us for doing so. And by the way, did you ask that soldier where his apartment is, where he lives?
No, I didn't.
They all live in Tiberias, comfortably in Tiberias, a seafront apartment overlooking the beautiful hills and the Sea of Galilee, while the Israeli soldiers up north are protecting him and letting him do that.
Wow.
Paid for by the UN.
There you go. Okay, so let's talk about the preciseness of these targets. We have a video here of a targeted house that was hit in southern Lebanon. So when people, because this is the narrative right now on secular media, BBC, CNN, said, they're just hitting civilian homes, they're hitting all these different things. This video will actually just break that narrative completely. That's what we're seeing right there.
Yep.
Okay, so watch this video of a target they hit in southern Lebanon. That is simply amazing when you look at this.
Look at the buildings all around.
Yeah.
And they're just hitting that one particular building.
So that's one target they hit, and of course all the secondary explosions that happened from there. Now here are the Islamic prayers.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I wonder if Israel doesn't play on it during the prayer time. It wouldn't surprise me if they didn't do it for that reason. But this is, to me, the everybody wants to call them murderers and butchers and all this, but this is the preciseness that you're looking at a neighborhood here, and right in the middle of all this, they find the target. Obviously, they had intelligence for that target.
Mm-hmm.
They nail it in one shot, and then you heard how many rockets, how many secondary things were in those buildings or that building right there. So I saw you could actually in the video, you saw part of the hill just collapses because of how much stuff is in there. Now that right there saved X amount of lives. Obviously, when you stop things like that, and they're precise. And I think this is the pictures, and those are the videos the world needs to be seeing, rather than when they have those I call them stock videos, where a lot of times they show the same things over and over. It's been from years ago.
Well, they got caught earlier today saying that Israel was somebody was attacking something in northern northern Israel, southern Lebanon, around the oil refineries, and it ended up being a Ukrainian attack
Yes.
in Russia. So
Yeah.
they're lying on what the source of the
Oh
news
yeah.
and the stories actually are.
So talk about the military part, and obviously this is something we want to pray. We want to pray that innocent citizens are not hit. We know
Yeah.
Israel's taken every step possible to make sure that doesn't happen. Obviously in the history of world wars, they have the least ratio, or the best ratio of civilians hit versus terrorists and the armies. So they're doing the best they can do. The fact is, the preciseness here is incredible, and the intelligence that goes with it, to me, is
Yeah.
another level.
Well, I mean, do you remember a few months ago, the U.S. Stopped the shipment of munitions to Israel? And there was this big deal, we're asking for precision missiles and they're big bombs, and we just can't do it. This is exactly why we asked for it.
That's right.
It wasn't for Gaza. We had plenty for
Yeah.
Gaza. It was for the next war. We knew this phase of the war was going to come, and we knew what we had to do within Lebanon and probably later on Iran and anyone else that gets involved. We know we need precision missiles because we don't want to kill the civilians. We have nothing against the Lebanese people. Again, this is a war against Hezbollah, not Lebanon. It's a war against, the rulers in Iran, not the people of Iran. We want precision missiles to hit our targets, and only the targets hit the terrorists and hit the munitions and the missiles. No one else do we want to die. That's why we ask for the precision missiles. That's why it's important that we get it. So Israel has great intelligence. I don't know if you guys noticed this, but this is what we heavily rely on. But look at, the amount of targets that we've hit just within the past couple of days in Lebanon, that's not our intelligence. That's people picking up a phone and saying, get these people out of my backyard. The Lebanese people do not want Hezbollah there. And they know the faster Israel destroys their munitions, destroys the actual people on the terrorists on the ground there, the faster they go north and the sooner Israel comes in and frees them from Hezbollah. They're not big fans of Israel, but they don't have to be big fans of Israel. We got a saying in the Middle East, I think it's everywhere, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Well, we may be their enemy, but we're no Hezbollah. So they want us to come in and eradicate Hezbollah from the region so that they can go back to their normal lives. In this part of the country, everyone's agriculturally based. They're farmers. They want to go back to their daily lives. That's all they want. And they can't do it with 150,000 rockets buried in their populated areas. And they know they're the ones that are going to suffer the consequences for Hezbollah's actions.
Yeah, can you speak to, especially in the north, I've been hearing a lot of reports about this, about how, you have the Iron Domes more in your more populated areas, but unfortunately in the north it's not there, and this is a major point of contention and concern for Netanyahu and his military about that. The north is mostly exposed, and I think you kind of spoke to it a little bit about how the reason having those precise missiles are so important is because in order for them to protect themselves and respond, they need some force of protection, because unfortunately what we're seeing is it's not there. Can you kind of speak to the military setup defense there for that?
So the Iron Dome, if you think about it in like a grid system, they put them in to protect areas that are populated. So we only have a limited amount of money, and we put it into sophisticated equipment in regions. And you do have them in the north, you have them in the Golan Heights, but for the most part, our problems have been from the south. So we've put most of them surrounding the area coming from the south north, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, things like that, to protect the thousands of rockets that have come. We've had like 20,000 rockets fired at us in 1 year, this past year. That's insane. So the north has, we know the potential, but again, the rockets there are a lot different than the ones coming from the south. So most of those batteries have been situated around the populated areas of the coastal plain towards the Jerusalem area. And then in the north, it's, like I said, agricultural areas. You have Haifa, you have some major cities. They do have it, but not the mass amounts. But there's another aspect to it. If we look at, and again, Hezbollah has been watching what's been going on in Gaza, taking notes the whole time. But the Iron Dome can be overwhelmed. And we're starting to see that. You fire 15 rockets at Israel, we'll shoot all of them down or let them land in the open areas. You shoot 150 at Israel, now we have an issue. You shoot 1,000 at Israel, well, now we see, October 7th all over again. You shoot 150,000 at Israel, and we're starting to dig graves. So it's a problem. They know that we're weaker on our protection on the north, which
Well,
is why we're taking this. Sorry, go ahead.
there's going to come a line if it gets to that level. This is very important. I was at a briefing with Danny Danon. Is that his name?
Danon, yeah.
Yeah, he's in the United Nations. He was. I'm not sure his role is
No.
now, but anyway, he talked about that very point of being overwhelmed, and what he said is, all rules are gone when it gets to that level. And he said, we're talking carpet bombing. We're talking about things that he said, I think he was just trying to scare people when he was talking, but he was trying to get us to get funding. That's what he was, his speech to us for. But I think the point was, he said, you do have to change the rules when there's an overwhelming response. I think that's why you're seeing the preemptive strikes right now, so that we don't have this type of, like that video we just showed. That could be one of those overwhelming moments right there, that they just unload everything out of that house. So they're doing this in a proper way. I think they're doing everything they can to avoid the overwhelming, what you're talking about here. But the fact is that you if that starts happening, all rules are kind of have to go by the side. Now, so how does that play out politically in Israel with the dissension? I know the war right now is unifying the country to a certain degree. But every lull in the war that we just had recently, you saw all the protests come back and all this. Any little bit of lull, if you have a week of lull of nothing really bad happening, all of a sudden you got 100,000 people out in the streets doing this thing. But the war is actually unifying the country. How is it handling politically what's going on right now?
Yeah, so Israel's always got 1,000 opinions on every issue. And I think you were right on there when you said, Israel gets a week off and we start to tear ourselves apart. We get bored. I don't know what it is, but you have, the same thing's happening in America. You have the left wing using every single tool that they have to try and overtake the government or get themselves in. And just like in the States, our media is controlled by the left. So you have people funding all these protests, and they'll say, tomorrow we're going 12 o'clock, we're going to march on the prime minister's house. And you'll get 10,000, 100,000 people. Well, not in Jerusalem, but you get 10,000 people to do it. 10,000 people is not the majority of the people of Israel.
That's right.
Again, you go up north and you talk to them and ask them what they want. You go down south, you ask them what you want to happen. The majority of the people of Israel want this to end, and we want peace after it. Meaning, I want to go back to my daily life. The only way to do that, destroy Hamas completely, destroy Hezbollah completely, secure our borders. That is the only way. I don't care what the UN says, and I don't care what France and England say at the end of the day. I want to be able to live my life and make sure my children have a tomorrow as well. That's all that matters. So, yes, war unifies Israel faster than anything else that could. But again, we get that lull and we start to get bored and we start to have this internal turmoil. It usually starts within the government, by the way. And you'll start to have ministers threaten to walk away if you don't, give in to my demands. Then, you have the escalation. Okay, we'll put our differences aside. We'll get back to it. But they'll remember what they said. Now we have a lull again, right? To the protests. I'm going to go to America, get support there. I'm going to go to England, get support there. We're going to get you out of government. And they're raising support funds mainly for all these things when they come back to Israel. And we started to see that with the left on the protests in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. The funding is all coming from abroad for this stuff. And then it's being propagated and pushed by the media within Israel. We didn't invent this. We're using the same tools that you guys do in America and everywhere else in the world. But you do have this internal conflict that is beginning to become vocal again. Again, now being pushed to the sides because of the situation and the escalation. But at the end of the day, it's going to come back. And there's going to be a change within the government. And it could happen very soon. And they've been talking about it, and they've actually said who's going and who's coming in to replace them. But again, on hold now because of what's happening. But just to add to what you said before, Tim, about your meeting with Danny Danon, the two things that are major that Israel will respond. I don't think we'll ever carpet bomb someone unless there's a nuclear missile in the air coming at us. But the missiles raining down, but also you start aiming at our big cities. You aim at our port cities. You aim at Haifa, which is a huge city and a port city. That's a game changer, and that happened today.
Yes.
And where would you say this? I don't know if you've heard this, but Alan Dershowitz here in America, he's been pushing for quite some time. Obviously, it's easy, not living in the land to say this, but he's pushing that Israel should basically go and bomb Tehran and other cities in Iran. And I'm starting to see, from what I'm gathering, is some of your more right-wing news organizations are pushing that. Is that obviously just a media push, or how are the people feeling as far as, obviously we know the North wants to go into Lebanon, but what is there, especially within the government, the push of how the people feel about possibly escalating it that much? Is it just a nuclear bomb? That's where they're going to go, and like the escalation there for that?
Yeah. No, I don't think the nuclear bomb's the escalation for that. Number one, look at the government. The people of Israel voted for the prime minister who's in right now. They might not agree with him now, but they're the ones that put him in the government. So look at what he's been saying, talking about the head of the snake, who's funding all this. He's not inventing this stuff. The people of Israel know this, and we know it full-heartedly. So, okay, destroy Hamas, destroy Hezbollah, destroy the Houthis, but they're just going to pop right back up under different names, maybe different countries. At the end of the day, in order to stop all this, we have to go after Iran. And we know that. Everybody in Israel knows that. Now, what is going to be the catalyst for that? Well, if a nuclear bomb comes at Israel, absolutely, we're going to go after them. But Israel's great at preemptive strikes. And the best defense or offense is best defense is an offense, right? Or something like that. You know what I'm saying? In order to prevent a nuclear bomb from coming or funds going to any of these other proxies around the world, eventually we have to deal with Iran. And it's very unfortunate. But keep in mind, the people of Iran are not behind the government. There's a very large portion of that country that hates them and are very pro-Israel. You see the protests in Iran. What do? They wave Israeli flags. This is fantastic. And it shows that, okay, they might not be the biggest fans of Israel, but they hate their government. And they don't want the dictators that are there.
We had a briefing by BB years ago when they got all the plans for the nuclear program, and we were briefed basically how they got those documents, and they rolled into Tehran basically with a truck, and he said, "Look, it's not easy to get Iranians to cooperate." It's what he said. He said there's guards at the door. You tell them to just walk away for a couple hours and give them a little money, and they leave, and we unload the truck. We get the truck loaded up, and we leave. He said it's that simple. He said I'm not complicating this thing. And so when you have people that hate their government, look, oppression is oppression. I don't care what your religion is, unless you're a radical Muslim and you believe in all that stuff fully. If you're just a common Muslim or you just an atheist or whatever, you don't care about this, because the ideology of Islam it penetrates and ruins your life because it's not the true one God. So therefore, in the heart of man, remember the word of God's written on the hearts of all men. Yeah. And there's a resistance in your spirit, man, within you, some level. Even if you don't know Jesus or you don't know Yeshua, there's a resistance there that you say, this is not right. And so that's what we're hoping. That's what our prayers are, is that Iran and others would be activated. And I think you're right. We're going to have to deal with Iran. I think America should be a big asset in that area. They should be. We're going to see with this coming election, and we're almost out of time, but I do want to shift a little bit for you. And what is the sentiment in Israel concerning our election? What are you feeling? What's the pulse of the nation? Trump versus Harris. What's going on out there in the streets of Jerusalem and in Israel?
Yeah, it's a big one. I mean, we know our friends. We can count them on one hand now. And it's a huge problem for us. America's always been behind, not always, but for a long time has been that big brother, that backbone that we could always rely on. Who cares what the world says? America's got our back. Well, with the wrong president, it doesn't. And, you start to see the whole Biden administration, Harris administration, if that happens. We've seen what they've said and what they've done in the past. Who cares what they say they'll do? Your actions speak louder. Harris has never been a true friend of Israel. She can say whatever she wants. And her husband's Jewish, but some of the biggest anti-Israel people on earth are Jews. So that says nothing to us.
Correct.
Trump has, let's look at his actions. He put the capital back in Jerusalem. He declared the Golan Heights sovereign Israeli territory. I mean, he's time and time again stood behind Israel and the Jewish people. So Israel is very, very heavily invested in this next election, and we know. I mean, depending on what America decides here, it could pave a way for a easier future for us. Not that either way is going to be easy, but an easier future or a very difficult, self-secluded one. And at the end of the day, we all, not all, but a lot of us believe in God. There's a lot of religious Jews here, some Messianics, of course. We believe in God, and we know we'll be safe. We've always, God's the one that's got our back, and that's really all that matters. But it's nice to have friends that you can speak to and get things from, handshakes and hugs. But
What do you think? I know this is just an opinion, but if there was an election in Israel for our election, and who do you think they would vote for? Who do you think would win?
If Israel was voting,
Yes.
Landslide for Trump.
Okay.
I think
That's good to hear. I mean, that's good to hear in that sense. And I think you do need to know your friends. And I think Kamala just recently on her interview with the black journalist said that they purposely are withholding weapons from Israel in order to have leverage against them. And look, man, you're messing with people's lives when I understand it's a diplomacy. I understand. I'm in that world. I get that. But here's the fact, what if somebody was doing that to us? What if we had rockets coming from Canada and we had a country that could help us and say, no, we're not going to give them to you because we want to leverage you and we want to control your emotions and control what you're doing. And I think we'd have a real issue with that. And so
I think that's the thing. You guys are forgetting that we're just a stepping stone to get to you guys. Correct. And if we don't knock them out here, you're target number. You're the big Satan. We're a stepping stone on the way to you guys. So if you don't support us in this stuff, you're next.
Yeah, and I think that's a narrative we give. I think we add to that, but I think that's absolutely true.
I'm glad you said that because I think a lot of Americans and even other nations around the UK, France, they forget that. There's a military expert out of West Point who points this out. He does a lot of statistics on the military versus civilian casualties, and he points out very heavily. He's like, look, if we allow Hamas to get away with what they got away with get away with what they did on October 7th, and possibly Hezbollah for possibly doing something similar, if you allow that, you just change modern warfare altogether. You then make the UN even more powerful than it possibly already is, and you say, well, your individual constitutions and individual nation laws, states do not matter. It all comes under one global sphere, which obviously I think most nations and people would understand. But I think that's the thing for us here is that people would awaken to that. Is that something that obviously you understand, but do most Israelis understand, like, hey, this is what we hope Americans and even our other allies would understand, like, if you don't help us, they're coming for you next.
Yeah, we absolutely know that, and we've actually said it. I think Bibi said it in Congress. So we've stated it, and we say it to the whole world. Look at Europe. That's the perfect example that you just mentioned. I mean, the swings that have happened in Europe in my lifetime are like unbelievable, and we can sit back and look at that and say that is horrific. But if we don't learn our lessons from studying history, it's going to just repeat itself. If America doesn't learn the lessons by looking at what happened to Europe, it's going to happen to America because you guys are going in the same way. And I'm not trying to remove us from that because we're in that same context as well. But the whole world needs to study this stuff and look at the two sides, look at the costs and the bonuses of being in a relationship with both sides and what benefits us the most. Forget oil, forget all that stuff. Of course, that's a heavy price to pay if you say I'm not going to go with the Arab world because then we're going to pay more for oil, which you guys have lots of anyway. But that shouldn't be a deciding factor. It should be, the relationship that you have with the nation, the benefits of it. Well, like I said, we're the only democratic nation in this part of the world, but look at everything that comes. I mean, why is the Arab world flocking to Israel to do business with us? Because everyone that does prospers on both sides. We bring more to the table than anyone else in this region.
Yes.
And forget the spiritual aspect of it, but we do. And why would you choose the other side, which is just dictators that have no economy? I mean, Hamas uses our economy. in what you guys give, what the world gives. So they have no economy. They have dictators and death. That's about it. So, I don't know why anyone would choose, them over us. Democracy should always prevail. I'll stop talking. I know we're getting too long, but
No, that's good. No,
you
no,
get
go.
my you get my drift.
Yes. Well,
Yeah.
as we close out here, obviously, prayer for Israel, I think that's going to be the big thing. And obviously, we are praying. It's hard because, war sounds so evil, and it is. But the
It
fact
is.
is, I was reading the Psalms of Ascent today, the Psalm 129. It says, "May all who hate Zion be put to shame and turn backward. Let them be like grass upon the housetops, which withers before it and grows up." I mean, David is pretty serious here about the
Yeah.
war that he's dealing with, and with the reaper does not fill this land, or the binder of the sheaves in his bosom, nor do those who pass by say, "The blessing of the Lord is upon you. We bless you in the name of the Lord." I mean, obviously, this has been a historical battle with Israel. Obviously, its whole history, but this is it. God does not want people who hate Zion, and Zion's a bigger word than we realize. It's because to
Oh, yeah.
me, that I get grafted in that through Christ Jesus and through being a joint heir. There, I'm part of Zion. If you ask me, I do. I feel like I am, and us as the
Absolutely.
believers are. We're part of this. So this is a whole issue. And I think this is where I always remind people of Romans chapter 1, where the Lord says all men are without excuse. This is a place where, well, what if they didn't hear the gospel, or they didn't hear, salvation message or whatever? Look, God is a just God. And in any war like this, it says all men are without excuse. Nobody's coming before the throne in eternity and saying, well, Israel killed us or America killed us. I didn't get to hear the gospel. That's not biblical. It's not justice.
No.
God finds a way to speak to them. If you want to speak to the spirituality of that and these type of passages in Psalms.
Yeah, look, I mean, that's a huge topic to talk about because you see, all the death and destruction that's happening. I don't know how many Bibles there were in the Gaza Strip or are. I don't know how many, Bibles you can find up in Hezbollah-controlled southern Lebanon or anywhere else, really. You have these dictators oppressing the population. Almost impossible to sneak in Bibles to these regions. People do. God bless them for it. But yeah, it's a huge topic because, well, Israel's going to kill them. They're going to kill us. If people die of never hearing of the gospel, things of this. But I agree with you 100%. God is a just God. He is justice. Therefore, I don't see, any spiritual law saying that he can't reveal himself to you before he dies, before you die, sorry, or anything of that sort. God can come as a cloud or a donkey. Why can't he come to you a second before you die and say, here I am?
That's it. I had a missionary friend. It was in a country in southern Africa, not South Africa, it was another one, Zambia or somewhere. But he talked about how when he went there, it was Rodney Howard Brown. I've actually heard the testimony. And he said these villagers told this story that they never heard the gospel, never had a Bible or anything. But one night they looked up at the sky and said, "Whoever created this, we believe in you. Who are you?" And the missionaries came in there and started sharing the gospel. And they said, "Well, who is this?" And they said, "Jesus." Well, that's who we want to believe in. They'd already gotten born again in a sense by creation. That's what Romans 1 talks about. All creation shares the beauty of God. So that's the mercy of God. So please, if that narrative comes against you as a viewer today, people saying, well, they're not, you're killing them before they get saved and all that. God is a bigger God than that. And his sovereignty goes way beyond what you and I can measure here. So we want to remember that. So as we got about 2 minutes here, why don't you close us out? Is there anything we can pray? What are some of the topics we can pray for the people, especially for the salvation revival, things that I know that's part of your ministry and what you're believing for?
So number one, I mean, like you just said, I'm here in Israel, so I mean, I'll speak to anyone that I can, but especially these soldiers going into battle, 70% of Israel is secular. I mean, it's secular to the extreme. Don't even believe there is a God. These are the ones going into battle, fighting on our front lines. pray that they have encounters. I know God is everywhere. He's been encountering the troops on both sides, civilians. So pray that they have an encounter, that they know why they're fighting and who they're fighting for. These people aren't coming against Israel because we're Israel. They're coming against the God of Israel.
Yeah.
That's what this battle is about. So if they're going to come against us because of who our God is, let's have an encounter with that God. Reveal yourself to your people. He's done it so many times in the past. So that's my number one prayer, is that God reveals himself to his troops, to his people, even the ones that deny him to his face. Show your face to them. Let them know that you are there. You are the same yesterday, today, and forevermore. You are the God of Israel. There's only one king of Israel, and he still reigns in this land and everywhere else. So reveal himself to his people and to anyone that encounters the people of Israel, the troops or civilians. May they see God resting upon them and choose to follow that God, the only God. And like we said, look at Hezbollah, look at Israel. We act with a little bit more mercy than every other nation in this region. We're only going after the terrorists if possible, and everybody is noticing that. Yep. Within Lebanon, within Gaza. So let God have an encounter with them on that side as well.
Amen. Well, as I shared today, when God was dealing with the plagues in Egypt, he was dealing as much with Pharaoh and the Egyptians as he was with the Jewish people. Yep. That's what he said. He wanted to show them that he was God. Yep. I think he's trying to show the Lebanese, the Hezbollah, all of them, that he is God. So, absolutely. Okay, Benny, you have a ministry now. You got a new home there. You got a ministry you're birthing there. How can people get in contact or find out about what you're doing in your ministry?
So we're affiliated with what's called Converge International. Because of where I am, you won't see my picture or my family's picture, but there's a number. Otherwise, honestly, I don't know. I didn't expect that question.
I'm sorry. I know how to. I can help them. But
okay.
Actually, our support starts this month for you guys. And if you do give to Christian Center, just please know that you can put that designation on there to Benny Friedman and his ministry there, and we sow through Converge, and so they'll be they give it to him. I think there's a website. It's Converge
there
Ministries,
is,
and it's in Florida, I believe, and you can read about
it
that.
Is.
They have different.
I can tell you my employee number. That might help. 233-462. I think.
There you go. Say it again.
233-462.
And you can do that, and when you go on there, they'll ask that on your donation. And they'll put it in there as well, and then they'll make sure that it gets to Benny.
Or you can give on our website. Yeah. We have a tab for Benny as well.
We do, yeah. Just go to our website on the Give button, and we do it. And we don't keep any of that. We sow that straight to Benny, and it goes straight to him and his wife Naomi and his new tribes that he keeps adding to. So tell your wife and your children hello. We look forward to coming back to Israel and being with you guys.
Please.
We love you. Thanks for being with us today, Ben.
Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Okay. Well, Zach, you want to say anything before we close out here today? Anything on your?
I think the big takeaways from Benny are, and I know we see some people in the chats who obviously don't agree with us. There's some people saying some things about anti-Semitism in the New Testament, and unfortunately that is true. Dr. Michael Brown, I would suggest go reading for anybody who hasn't. Our hands are stained in blood about the unfortunate mistakes that the church and church history has made. And we repent of that, and we have repented of that, and there are those New Testament believers who do repent of that. So we just and that's why we're here. We want to stand alongside Israel in support of it, because going back to Genesis, those who bless Israel will be blessed. And so we just want to stand with that, and we just want to kind of point that out, of acknowledging that, yes, there are some issues there, but there are also those who have strong beliefs in the New Testament, the full gospel, and understanding that he is both the God of the Old Testament and the New Testament as well. So we kind of want to point that out, and taking away from what Benny said is, look, the people in Israel are resolute. There's even someone in here who disagrees with some of the things we said, who says, they're resolute. But I think we also can't forget the human nature of understanding that there is a toll, there is a weight that comes upon people in that type of, think about 100 rockets a day, and you don't know which ones are going to land and which ones are not. And even the past 2 nights of sleeping in, bomb bunkers and things of that nature. And I've even heard reports of people sleeping through the night, knowing rockets are going near them, not knowing if it's going to come to them, but they just have this, there's a certain peace that these people have, the Jews have in the land there. They're trusting in something, and obviously whether they realize it or not, it's God. And so we just want to continue to pray for them, support them, stand alongside of them. And if you want to give to Benny directly, you can go on our website, and we continue to give if you give to our ministry as well. So that's kind of one thing to take in note as well.
Okay, well, thanks for listening today. Sorry, I went a little bit over, but that's okay. We thought this was an important topic. Continue to pray. Watch our pipeline report page on Facebook. We'll give you updates, news articles that kind of give you an update what's going on there. People ask me websites to listen to. I like the Times of Israel, YNet News in Israel. Those are the English websites that give news updates. Jerusalem Post is kind of liberal. You can do that, but those are some good ones that I think are pretty good. You can check it out as well. There's just a lot of things. We're trying to keep you updated on this as well. My podcast, I'm covering that as well because I think it's a very important time to talk about this. And so we cover you. We do pray for Israel today. We pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Remember this, that God says, if you pray for the peace, you shall too prosper. And that's my heart for us and for the land of Israel. Also, tomorrow we'll be back at noon praying for states, praying for the upcoming elections. There's some shifts in that. We've had a dream. I didn't have time to get to that today. We may do something on that on another time, but be praying in the election. The votes have already started. They're already early voting in some states. I know Pennsylvania is already early voting and so forth. So somebody's already casting votes. We need to make sure that they hear the Lord and they walk in what God has for them today. So God bless you. Have a great day. We'll see you tomorrow.